Hi, my name is Will, and if you're new, I've been a developer, a software architect, and a CTO for decades now. What I want to talk about today a little bit is developer jobs, and there are a few charts that I want to show you to help you kind of understand and explain what's going on with the developer job market, a lot of the news, and explain kind of this confusing feeling that everybody has about where it is, what's the future look like. So first I want to show you a chart of what Indeed postings have looked like over the last year. If you look at that chart and you just look at the trend line, you'd say, it doesn't look too bad. Actually, it looks like it's growing pretty well. It's not phenomenal. Obviously, we'd want it to be quicker, but the postings are trending up. Now let's look at the next chart showing Indeed postings starting in February of 2022. And if you look at this looks like a catastrophic collapse. You look like you're rolling along and then just the bottom completely falls out, which is also valid data, right? Both of those are true at the same time. The last year can be looking better and things can still look pretty bad since February of 2022. And so one of the first things that you might say looking at that chart is you might say, well, is this because of AI or ChatGPT type stuff? And no, well, the crash started before ChatGPT launched. The ChatGPT didn't launch until November of 2022. And honestly, that was not the kind of level of tech that would affect jobs. It was a nice chatbot tool, but it's only been since, I would argue, November last year that we're really seeing Claude Code in particular really having a significant impact on the way and the scale and the scope that I think is changing how people would do software development. And what about Elon Musk and Twitter? One of the theories I've heard is that Elon Musk came into Twitter and he basically fired almost everybody. Is the saying, like it could be 50%, 90%, depending on the point in time. But that Twitter stayed up despite Elon firing all those people. And so one of the theories is that Elon's firing inspired a lot of CEOs and tech workers to start firing their staff. Again, the problem is that we see that the crash is starting back in February and Musk didn't even complete the acquisition until November. So you see a big, huge drop long before that occurs either. And both ChatGPT and the Twitter acquisition, both happening in November, there was a lot going on then. And so I think that then segues into the next chart, which is the full set of Indeed data tracked by Fred. And what you'll see there is that you have this period of about 2 years of just massive hiring done by tech. And that becomes this question of what's going on. Because, some of this is COVID related. That sort of part of it is that there are folks who are acknowledging that, yes, COVID led to mass overhiring, which brings us to the final chart, which is the interest rate chart for the Federal Reserve. And here we can see that if we have the federal funds effective interest rate chart and we overlay that on top of the same time scale, you can see that this is just an interest rate story, which is really boring. It's not some crazy AI and technology and AGI and all that kind of stuff driving the tech sector. It's just interest rates. That's all it is. Again, those markers for when did ChatGPT or the Twitter thing happen, they don't correlate with the data. And I think that gets into really touching on how you can kind of tell that it's not really AI or LLMs that are driving a lot of this. When a company announces that they're going to do layoffs and they're citing AI or LLMs as the reason for it, there's some really basic questions that you can ask, like, did they go through a training period first? So, over the last 20 years, we've seen a lot of outsourcing happen where, people are told, we're going to outsource this work to, maybe it's offshore, maybe it's another low-cost provider. And so one of the first things that they do is they ask people to train their replacements. And so one of the really easy tells for whether or not an AI or an LLM is supposed to be taking your job is, were you ever asked to train it? There are a few scattered reports of things kind of like that, but not really. Instead, what we're seeing is people getting notices of layoffs, and they're just bulk firings. I mean, you'll go into work one day and, nobody's been telling you, you have to train this new LLM or that there's this new system coming online. It's just, mass firings. And that is much more consistent with layoffs in order to address financial concerns. So let me give you an example about that that's kind of happening right now. So there was an announcement that Oracle laid off just a huge, massive number of people. And so superficially, they might, in fact, for all I know, they probably did in the press release to say, oh, we're going to achieve operating efficiencies through AI or LM or something. But really, it's a question about debt and debt management and cash flow. I don't think it's a coincidence that they're doing those layoffs at the same time that they want to spend all this money for the Ellisons to acquire Warner Brothers Discovery. So yeah, if you're going to pick up $100 billion in debt to make an acquisition, you're going to want to change your cash flow position to manage that. And that's part of what I find really interesting is how often do people look at the debt or the expense profile and correlate that against any of these layoffs that are occurring. And probably the one area where I would say there is some really interesting legitimacy to the story around LLMs or AI affecting the economics and the staff pool is when a company is saying effectively, we're going to build a data center, and to help pay for that, we're going to fire folks. But that data center doesn't necessarily even have to be used for AI or LLMs. It could be used for lots of things. And that's another whole topic. What's going on with these data centers? How many of these have been announced and are never actually even going to build? There's a lot of sort of weird back and forth economic trades where, one company claims that they're putting in money into another, but there's no actual money being changed hands. It just looks good for a press release. All of that notwithstanding, what we are seeing is that the job market for developers is slowly recovering. But there's a few things that are pretty important to note. One of them is, you should be able to use an AI or an LLM in your job to help you be more effective. If you're the sort of person who says, oh, well, I don't believe in any of these AIs or LLM tech and I'm not going to touch it, that is an easy way to get screened out for hiring. Just the same way that, over the last 10 or 15 years, if somebody says, I don't believe in Scrum or Agile, they might have gotten screened out for not going to work there. They might get screened out if they said, oh, I'm a C++ guy. I don't think that Java or .NET or TypeScript can possibly work. Easy screen. These things keep happening over time. If I said to somebody, if somebody's going to make a hire and they said, well, I don't believe in using an IDE, I don't believe in autocomplete, right? So if you said to me, oh, I don't believe in using an LM, instead I want to go back to copying and pasting things off of Stack Overflow. I don't use any online resources at all. I don't believe in having an LM help me with writing documentation. Like at some point, you start to lose credibility as a developer. And that's part of, I think, where you're seeing some different breakouts for who's able to get hiring and who's able to get hired and who's not. So I guess that's my first recommendation is if you haven't already, go ahead and pick up a Claude Code subscription. Do not just get by with, your work Microsoft Copilot subscription or something. No, you need to use a real developer tool to help you with that stuff. Next one, try to have some fun with it. Don't just try to build things for work. Take some time to build your dream project, whatever that could be, and have fun with it and explore the limits. And what you'll find is you'll hit limits pretty quickly, but you'll also find, at least I do, that it eliminates a lot of the drudgery, which is kind of the point. Another thing you'll notice is that it's very easy to produce a lot of stuff that's not great quality very quickly. And it reminds me a lot of the way that years ago we'd go meet with startups and they'd have built their MVP in PHP or something. They're trying to get by as inexpensively and quickly as they can. And then you go and you look at the PHP app and it's filled with things like string concatenation, just sending stuff to the database. Right? It's fast, it was quick, and nobody thought about security at all. And so that's consistent with a lot of my friends who are doing consulting right now, where they say they're getting lots of work where the work looks like somebody built an MVP or a prototype, or they even tried to put something into production, and because they were non-technical, it kind of blew up, and now they need somebody to come in and clean up the mess, which, same thing as the high schoolers PHP app from 10 years ago. Now it's a product person who built something with an LM. It's okay. Like that's just life. Life goes on. So the next part of that is of course, what are some things that might make the developer jobs market spike again? So obviously, the whole point is if interest rates came down significantly, that probably would lead to more investment, more hiring. And I'd like to think that people might dream a little bit bigger about what they can accomplish if they have tools to assist them, just the same way, like if I'm doing a construction project, if I can use power tools, I'm going to try and do more than I would if I had to use hand tools. I hope that there'd be more ambition there. Another one that to me is sort of shocking is if I have a product or an offering and it's got a huge bug count, and one of my first priorities was not using an LLM to get my bug count down or get my quality up, then what are you doing? Like, where are you going with this stuff? So anyway, so one of the first markers for when the jobs are going to come back is obviously interest rates are going to would have to come down. The next part is that the macroeconomic environment would need to stabilize. I don't want to get into a lot of the politics around it, other than to note that there's not a lot of stability right now for people who want to do long-term planning. It's very difficult to try to put a 1 to 5 year plan together and then to use that to justify hiring if you don't really know what your world is going to look like even next week. So if you want jobs to come back, you need stability. It's not that crazy. They're directly connected. The next one is that we are now several years in, so we're now into early 2026, and if a lot of these crashes started and the down market started to really be perceived as a thing culturally in about 2022, that's about 4 years. So over the next year to 2 or 3 is when you're going to start seeing that affecting the kids who are coming out with CS. So a couple of years ago, especially when the LM stuffs were really starting and all these CEOs were saying nobody's going to write code anymore, then why would you go into CS? Well, now you have a problem, because imagine that you've built your apps or your company or what have you on all of these vibe coded things with no technical people, and things aren't working and you're not sure how to fix it or what's even going on. You're going to want talented CS people to come out and be able to fix that. And that's one of the things that I find really interesting is how many of the kids are coming out of CS where they don't understand any of the low-level things, so then they don't understand error messages or how to fix things or what went wrong. And how that's going to play out over the next 1 to 3 years, where coming out of a CS program and you're basically a vibe coder versus if you actually understand computer science is going to be huge. And the fourth point, which I think is a thing that people are not talking about as much, but they should, which is I think that we are looking at the possibility that LLMs are going to get a lot cheaper to build and or to run. And I just keep seeing a lot of things like that, like a white paper that comes out where they say they've figured out how to cut the costs of doing the build by a factor of 10. Or I've seen some videos where they're showing where they take an LLM and they cook it into hardware. You put in your request and the response is essentially instantaneous. One of the things that strikes me is that right now I'm just spending a lot of time kind of babysitting my LLM, watching it run, reviewing what it's doing. And again, that's part of that quality issue. If my LLMs were instantaneous, then my cycle time on all that would collapse. And that would be ideally like a local hardware LLM that was instantaneous but had Claude Code capability. Doesn't feel that far out or that crazy of a thing. So how would that change the economics, right? Do you need to build as many data centers? Do you need to put as much money into building the data centers if you change the way that works? Maybe the model is over the next few years is that people don't want to run hosted LLMs. They want to put them on their own premises and their own data centers, and that changes the economic. Throw in all the things that LLMs don't affect. They don't affect your production data value. They don't affect your marketing, your brand the same way. They don't help you with face-to-face sales. How is all this stuff going to shake out? Again, I come back to that first chart, which is that over the last year, we're seeing the jobs starting to come back slowly. There are a few entities. Obviously, we're still going through that processing. And it's the big macroeconomic stuff. Like, the Oracle story to me isn't an AI or an LM story. It's a story of buying Warner Brothers Discovery. Anyway, so I hope that helps you feel a little bit better. And obviously, it doesn't help you if you don't have a job today, except insofar as, invest in learning some of these more modern tools and use that as a way to help. And then, of course, what I always recommend to everybody when it comes to somebody looking for a job is network. And that means, going out for coffees and lunches with everybody that you know in the tech industry and just say, hey, I'm looking for a job. That's what I would say to you today. And with that in mind, good luck, and hope to talk to you soon. Take care.